Relax, mate.
Oh, yeah.
G'day, Aaron. So you are one of those amazing helicopter pilots, mate. Tell me, how many years experience do you have to be flying one of these things, and what is this thing that's standing behind you?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, behind me is the Augusta Westland 139. It's probably one of the most common aeromedical helicopters used around the world at the moment. Here, Europe, everywhere really. And my experience, I joined the Army just out of high school and did 13 and a half years there, which is where I got the bulk of my experience, which is not uncommon for people that work in the industry. I flew the Chinook helicopter for the Australian Army before moving into the role here as the HEMS pilot.
Wonderful, mate.
Victoria.
How many thousands of hours do you need as a helicopter pilot to be able to work on these HEMS missions?
Yeah, it depends on the contract. States can vary significantly. For Victoria, it's 2,500 hours roughly on rotary wing aircraft, with 1,500 hours as the pilot in command. We can make some dispensations depending on experience levels, but that's a general figure that we'll hang our hats on for what we need.
No worries. So these aircraft are generally single pilot operations. Is that the same throughout most of the other states as well?
Yeah, so it does vary a bit, and it really depends on the operator of the aircraft. For us, we are single pilot, and there are quite a few aeromedical services throughout the country that are single pilot, but it's not uncommon to find multi-pilot, I should say, so two pilots up the front. But we use an aircrew officer who helps the pilot with navigation, winching, checklist procedures to subsidise the single pilot operations.
Right, wonderful. So we'll briefly talk about the aircrew officer. Explain to the people what an aircrew officer is and what sort of experience they need to be able to sit in that front left seat of the helicopter.
Absolutely. So an aircrew officer on this contract, they're kind of like the jack of all trades. So they help me as the pilot with programming the navigation system in the aircraft, with navigation when we're in the air, weather checks, all that kind of stuff, everything up to flying the aircraft, which they can't do. But they also help the paramedics quite a bit too with some basic medical procedures. They also operate our winch just here as well. So if we have to winch the paramedic into some rough terrain where we can't land, they operate that system too. Their requirements for hours-wise aren't as high. However, a lot of the guys are military background, guys and girls I should say, are military background. So they get their experience doing that, or with rescue services throughout the country that bring them up to speed and provide the skills for them to jump on an aircraft like this and immediately provide an impact.
Awesome, mate. That's fantastic. Now, I guess one thing a lot of people want to know about is safety around aircraft. It's a big thing that's plugged into a lot of paramedics. Yep. Do you want to just briefly, we'll walk around if you like, and
absolutely.
We can have a look at some of the safety features and things that you'd like to point out around the aircraft.
Yeah,
to
great.
start off with, I know this is a big question that lots of people ask. What are these things on the front of the aircraft there, mate?
Yeah, so these are not the guns.
They're not the guns. You've got the guns, haven't you, mate?
They're most commonly thought of. So they're like part of our speedometer system. So we have an indicated airspeed in the cockpit, which is quite important for what we do. And basically it just works on sensing difference between static and dynamic air pressure as we move forward through the air, and that provides a speed readout in the cockpit to tell us how fast we're travelling through the air. And that has different effects on how we do things and the aerodynamics around the aircraft at different speeds. So it's quite an important system. It has heat protection on it as well, so when we fly in cold conditions, so icing, the little holes at the front can get blocked up with ice fairly quickly, so it's important that doesn't happen. And yeah, they're a vital part of our instrumentation.
And they're called?
They're called the pitot heat. They're called the pitot system, the pitot tube.
Yep.
And then the pitot heat is what runs to the air to keep it warm to prevent icing.
Awesome. So not guns, don't fire
anything. Guns, don't fire them.
Excellent, mate.
And don't hang off them either. Yeah.
Wonderful. At the front of the aircraft, mate, is there anything we need to be worried about with safety concerns?
Yeah, the biggest thing would be the main rotor system. So although it sits quite high, it is at its lowest point at the 12 o'clock of the aircraft.
Yep.
So you can imagine if you've got a slope up from the nose of the aircraft, that gap can be reduced quite quickly. So if you're ever approaching an aircraft, you want to approach primarily from the 10 and the 2 or the 3 and the 9, and always at the direction of the crew. So there'll be a thumbs up if you cleared in that direction, or a definite hold if you're not clearing.
And I think that's probably the most important thing, is any time you do approach the aircraft, obviously you need to get the approval of the crew. So we're going to walk towards the back of the aircraft. If you want to point out any other things that are considered safety areas that we need to be concerned about. You've mentioned we shouldn't really be approaching from the back of the aircraft, so nothing past 3 and 9 as we talk about it.
Absolutely.
But at the front here, is there anything else that we need to be wary of?
Not entirely at the front. Like I said, the 12 o'clock is the main part you want to avoid, but the front of the aircraft is also where the pilot sitting in the front right-hand seat will have the best visibility, and they're kind of in charge of people moving in and out of underneath the rotor disc.
Yep.
So although they might not be passing the thumbs up or the hold signal, they're talking to the person who will be. So trying to make eye contact with someone at the front here is pretty important, even as you're moving in from the sides.
Yeah. No worries.
But
there's little lights that flash on and off the aircraft as you're starting up and starting down. Is that important for people to be aware of that?
Yeah, so if you see any lights flashing on the aircraft, even when the rotor blades aren't moving, it means that we're likely about to start up. So you shouldn't be anywhere around the rotor disc or in vicinity of the engines. One of the biggest chances of an engine failure happening, or a catastrophic engine event, would be during start, as we're putting fuel and air and igniting that mixture in the engine. So just making sure you're far enough away from the aircraft, outside the rotor disc definitely.
Yeah, good.
Impact with the start.
No worries. As we walk down the side here, mate, obviously there's a door to the side of the helicopter there, and the winch, we don't need to be concerned about that in normal operations, do we?
In normal operations, no. So the winch you can see now is stowed. So there's no potential for it to go up or down or impact you. But as you're moving into the door, I mean, it definitely could be an issue if you're using the step and stepping up here. So just watching your head, but you shouldn't be up that high anyway.
Sure, no worries.
And again, if you're moving in and out of the door, there'll be someone here, if the rotors are turning, to assist you in and out of the aircraft.
Absolutely. So any movement in or out of the aircraft, or any contact with the aircraft, should always be assisted by an aircrew person, either the pilot, the paramedic, or the aircrew officer as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
No worries. As we move towards the back, you have already mentioned the engines. What are the concerns? You know, we're getting past the 3 o'clock that we talk about on the helicopter now, and we're moving towards the back. What's the concerns with the engines, mate? What's wrong with
the
them?
biggest one for anyone approaching the aircraft is probably the exhaust. So you can see right here.
Yep.
So, you know, the internal temperature of the engines can get quite high. It usually sits about 500 degrees on the ground, more in the air.
Yep.
But those hot exhaust fumes are coming out the back of the aircraft. And although they're pointed up and away with the rotors turning and the air pushing down, there's a chance that it could affect someone on the ground. So it's just better to steer clear from there at all times.
No worries. Very good. And then as we move towards the back, there's another big fan down the back, isn't there?
Yeah, so this is the tail rotor. It basically counteracts the torque that the main rotor creates from spinning.
Yep.
To keep the aircraft pointed in the right direction. And although it's quite high, much like the front one, if there's a sloping ground, we often don't land on flat ground.
Yep.
You know, footy ovals are obviously quite flat, but if we're landing in a paddock or on the side of the road, with ditches and elevated terrain around the aircraft, the tail rotor can sit quite low, and it's something you could easily walk into. So probably the biggest no-go on the aircraft is the 6 o'clock tail rotor.
Yep.
For many
Can you
reasons.
Just stand underneath there for me, mate? Show us how high that is. So this is a 139, isn't it? An AW139.
Correct.
So this is quite a big helicopter.
It is. In the civilian industry, it's probably one of the bigger helicopters that we use, and definitely one of the bigger ones for aeromedical stuff. But you can see that, you know, there is a bit of separation, but like I said, if we're landed on a nose-up position, that tail rotor can sit quite low. There's a chance that it could impact you if you're walking. So this is probably the biggest avoid area of the helicopter. And another thing is we can't see you back here as well as we can see at the front. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, you know, there are other services which use smaller helicopters as well, and so that blades, they sit much lower than what this one does as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in an aircraft like the 135, which is another aircraft that can be used in aeromedical response, that tail rotor will definitely be sitting, you know, in an area even on flat ground that could definitely impact you, and their main rotor blades sit quite a lot lower too. So in general, for any helicopter, avoid the spinning tail rotor, avoid the main rotor, and just observe the crew and follow their direction at all times.
Mate, awesome stuff. So I'm going to ask you now, mate. So let's say I'm a crew, we're at the side of a road, there's been an accident, a guy's in the bush. I want to request the helicopter to come and pick up the patient. What sort of sized area do we need for a helicopter to land? I've heard all sorts of different things. They land at football ovals a lot, they land on the road a lot, but if we've got just a big dense area with trees, what sort of size do we actually need?
It's a good one, and I could spit off numbers like 10 foot from the mains, but that doesn't really mean anything to someone on the ground. So if you look for an area roughly 1.5 to 2 tennis tennis courts in size. That's a pretty good start and somewhere that we could probably land quite safely. So we're looking for something that size, but you also want to look up as well.
Okay.
So, you know, just because the ground's clear, if you look up and there's overhanging canopies or there's wires running directly across it, then obviously that's a big risk to us, and it'll negate us being able to land there. I think people also underestimate our ability to land in tight places as well, which is another thing. So yeah, if you go to that 1.5 to 2 tennis courts, that's probably a pretty good start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some good information in there as well. Probably the best things to think is nominate a landing site for the helicopter to be aware of. When they approach the scene, they will fly overhead and have a look and determine if that's an appropriate site. Things like dead shrubs and old shrubs is probably something you need to think of as well, especially through times of drought and stuff, in that the trees can become very weak, and then that big downdraft that you get from the helicopter can significantly blow off a lot of branches and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, we're a big fan. So people underestimate also the amount of, you know, the air we displace, which is quite large. So yeah, dead branches are very good. Anything on the ground that might blow away or blow towards people or blow back up into the aircraft. So we've had instances of corrugated sheeting that haven't been seen that have kicked up and hit the underside of the aircraft. So that's a big consideration. And then also dust in that regard too. So it's quite dry, it hasn't rained for a while. It's quite, you know, a dusty paddock. It's very risky for us to land in heavy dust. Light dust is fine, we can usually blow it away. But heavy dust is a significant barrier to us being able to land safely.
Mate, this will be the question that will be on the tip of everybody's tongues. How fast, mate? How fast does it go, bro?
So we cruise at about 130 knots.
Which means nothing to the average person.
Which means nothing to the average person. But what that means is probably about 220 to 240 kilometres per hour.
Yeah, good.
And if we have a tailwind across the ground, we're flying a lot faster, so we can get to you quicker. If we've got a significant headwind, then it'll just delay our ability to get there a bit quicker.
Sure, no worries. 0 to 100 in what, mate?
Oh, geez, 0 to 100. Probably, it's not that quick. It's probably about 15 seconds.
Yeah, right, okay. It's slower than my mum's car.
Yeah.
Righto. So sometimes we hear the rumours there's a cloud in the sky and the helicopter can't come, but I know there's more to it than that. What are the actual things that affect the ability of a helicopter to respond to a job?
Yeah, so often, or more often than not, the cloud is not the issue, it's the weather phenomena associated with it. So for example, thunderstorms, which can be embedded in cloud, they're obviously one of our biggest risks, airborne. Severe turbulence, you've got lightning, you've got hail. Hail's another one in clouds, but also probably our biggest one in wintertime is the freezing level. So anytime there's visible moisture in the air and it's less than 0 degrees, we can get icing on the airframe and on the rotors, which is not good because it disrupts the airflow around the rotors and it disrupts the aerodynamics on the rotor system too. So although there's cloud, it's probably not that's stopping us. It could be something like that icing, like I just said, severe turbulence, thunderstorms. There's also fog too.
Mate, so you spoke about the weather then with the icing on the blades and all that sort of stuff. The other weather, like hot weather and so forth, is that really going to affect as much at all?
Yeah, it does in the summer quite a bit, and it's mainly to do with the performance of the aircraft. So the hotter the air is, the less dense that it is. So two things that impacts. One is the aerodynamics. So there's less air moving across our rotor blade system, which means it has to work harder to produce the same amount of lift. And also the cooling on the engines. So there's less air moving through the engines that's cooling those engines. So we often hit limits a little bit quicker in summer than we would in winter. So it's just a consideration, and it's compounded by altitude. So here in Essendon, we're almost at sea level, so it's not too much of an issue. But once we start getting up into the high country in summer, there's big impacts on our performance and our payload carrying capacity too as well.
Because these helicopters run pretty heavy with all the equipment, and I'm assuming a lot of EMS providers that do helicopter emergency medical service type stuff, often their aircraft run heavy with all the paramedic equipment and doctor equipment that sits in the back.
We're carrying a lot of stuff. So these aircraft will take off on a normal job from at about 6,500 kilos. The limit is 6,800, so 6.8 tonnes. So you can see already we're not far off. And then if we have to carry extra fuel or extra medical personnel, you know, that weight gets quite close to that limit quite quickly.
So sometimes you get a job and it doesn't seem that far away, and you have to put on extra fuel. Why sometimes do you have to put on extra fuel, or are you sort of limited as to how far you can go with how much fuel you can carry?
So basically there's rules and regulations that stipulate if the weather are below a certain level, then we need to carry extra fuel to allow us to conduct an instrument approach or wait until that weather passes for us to land safely. So That's done through inters and tempos, which means either you're carrying 30 minutes of more fuel or 60 minutes of more fuel. Yeah.
Yep.
So the 30-minute it's restricting, but it's the 60-minute one that kills us. So 60 minutes of fuel is quite a lot. It's over 400 kilos of additional fuel.
Yeah.
So that pushes that limit quite high. So although something might be close in, we've got to consider that we may have to burn 60 minutes or just over 400 kilos more fuel. So we have to take that on board. It's a legal requirement for us. And it can be quite restricting, but necessary.
It can be quite frustrating for the ambulance crews when they go to jobs like that. They may be at a scene which looks clear. However, when we're returning back to the trauma centres, the weather that is approaching at that area can be terrible. So we have to carry the fuel that if we arrive back at the trauma centre, we can then turn around and go back to another destination to land. So
absolutely.
It's something often people don't actually think about very much at all. So fog, mate.
Yeah.
Tell me about fog. We love the fog gods, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Foggy nights are good. Not so much for patient care, though. So we try to do the jobs where we can. We don't say no for trivial reasons. Fog is a big one because, like low cloud, it's even lower. It sits on the ground, so we can't see things on the ground. We can't see where we're landing. And restricted visibility that low to the ground is incredibly dangerous because there are things like trees, towers, the ground itself with mountains rising. So fog is a big player for us. We can't really land anywhere that there is fog. I've been to jobs before where we get overhead and the fog's starting to blow in. So you've got to make a call at that point with the paramedic or the mic on board to say, hey, I can put you in at the scene, but we can't stay there and we may not be able to get you out, so you may have to road to the hospital, but at least we may be able to deliver the advanced skill set, more blood to the patient, which may help. Yes, unfortunately have to road back to a trauma centre. But fog is one that.
So what are the three things that make fog? There's like cold,
Yeah,
moisture and a little bit of wind. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Basically, so on cold, clear nights is where it's a bit of a surprise to some road crews sometimes, because the night might be beautiful, you can see the stars, but if it's cold and there's moisture in the air, as the air cools, it condenses, and that's where the fog kind of comes in. The air becomes saturated, so it turns into the water droplets, which is fog. And the little bit of wind needed is just to mix up some particles in the air to then create that fog. So usually on a quite a windy night, it's too much for fog to form. It'll blow it all away. But if there's a slight wind on a cool night with a bit of moisture, then and it's funny, it can be entirely localized to within a couple of kilometers. So one valley could be full of fog and everywhere else is fine. Local conditions impact fog.
What about wind? Wind's good for a helicopter, isn't it? Help you get off the ground?
Yeah, to a certain extent, wind is good for a helicopter. Absolutely. We're more efficient travelling forward through the air. So if we're in a hover and there's a lot of wind, it's kind of like we're travelling forward through the air. But we're in a hover, so it becomes more efficient. There's less power demand for us in the hover, so that's good. Too much wind, and in certain areas can be detrimental. So lots of wind in the high country where it's very mountainous can create mountain waves, which can create severe turbulence, which can be quite hazardous to the aircraft. We also get a lot of severe turbulence here in the Melbourne Bowl, just from the weather systems off the coast. So wind is good. Severe turbulence is not a showstopper, but again, we're talking about coupling with other things like thunderstorms, some low cloud.
And patient comfort.
And absolutely, patient comfort and patient care. A spinal patient getting transferred in severe turb, it may not be the best option. We'll brief the paramedics at the start of shift on the kind of weather phenomenon we're expecting, and that feeds into everybody's decision making.
Good. Is there a startup and shutdown concern with the blades? They talk about blade slap or something like that with wind?
Often not. It's not that bad. I've certainly never encountered a situation that bad. It's more once we're flying on approach to landing and takeoff where the wind can really impact us.
And obviously here in Melbourne, sometimes some of the trauma centres that we go to are a no-go because of the wind coming from the wrong direction.
So it comes down to our regulations again. We have certain type of approaches that we have to conduct at certain hospitals, and it's mainly for safety of people around the hospital. So the Royal Melbourne, for example, is in the middle of the city. So the approaches are designed that if something goes wrong, we can either land safely on the Melbourne, or we can go around and return to an airfield where we've got lots of runway and lots of room. So a part of those, the design criteria for those approaches is the wind having to be within a certain amount, within a certain angle of the nose. So if it's an all crosswind, for example, we may not be able to conduct the approach safely. So unfortunately, we can't land there because if something goes wrong, we may not have the potential to fly away from quite a populous area.
Yeah, good. Mate, that's awesome. Some fantastic questions there. I'm going to ask you a bit more of a personal one.
Yep.
Why do you do it? Why do you like this job so much? What is it about it? What excites you about it?
I got into flying because flying was fun.
Yep.
When I was young, my dad worked at the airport and I saw planes all the time, so that's what I wanted to do.
Yep.
When I got to year 12, I realised it was going to be way too expensive to pay for it, so I joined the army and they paid me for it. So that was how I got into it, and it's really fun. Coming here, though, the job is very rewarding. Every day we're out helping Victorians who are in trouble and providing the best level of patient care we can. So that's why we do it, I think, to help the community. And it's not bad for a sunset flight either.
Mate, good on you. Thank you very much for your service. Hey, can you take me through the cockpit?
Yeah,
Show
absolutely.
me some things inside the cockpit. That'd be amazing if you could.
Absolutely. So probably a bit smaller than most people think. I'll let you poke the camera in there for starters. So you can see it's not too exciting with all our screens turned off, but those big TV screens are where all our instrumentation gets displayed once we turn the batteries on and get the aircraft started up. I get asked this a lot, do you know what every button does? The short answer is yes, but we don't use every button every flight. So we know what they do, but sometimes we touch less than 50% of them during a flight. But basically our controls, up the front here, you'll probably see the cyclic, which is the stick in front of the seat that you can see there. So that's our cyclic. Our collective is down here. And then we've got our pedals down there. So it just helps with directional control, airspeed, altitude, all that kind of stuff in the aircraft. In the middle there is our radio suites. So all our radios sit there. Some navigation equipment as well. And also the brains of the computer is the little box that just sits up here with the little screen that you can probably see. So that's where we put all of the information, our navigation information, all our radio information, and it's how we talk to these screens up here. So what we input on here can be reflected up here, helps with navigation, helps with communication, and all our instrumentation and engine systems and instruments are displayed on here. So if something goes wrong, we use these screens to diagnose what's happening and then work together as a crew to come up with a solution.
Mate, that is awesome. There are a lot of buttons. I definitely
There are,
that much.
yep.
And we'll have a look in the back here of this one. This is just got some gear sitting in it, but this is the back of the aircraft. And generally the situation here is there is a paramedic and sometimes an extra person that sits in the seats there, and obviously we have a stretcher in the back which has just got some gear on it at the moment and winch capability.
Yep.
We're going to talk about the winch for the last thing for the session, mate, and then we'll call it quits. The winch, I think it's written on there how heavy we can carry up to 250 kilos a person.
Yep.
So is that just the weight of the person, or does that include the paramedic?
So that includes the paramedic as well. So paramedic, the stretcher, the patient, and any equipment. So we can get around that by setting the equipment up first by itself.
Yep.
But it is a consideration. So if it's quite a large person in a stretcher, it can be a limitation that we can't winch them just because of the limitations on the winch, because we've got to carry two people. Or another option is we can winch unaccompanied with a paramedic on the ground, operating the tag line, which basically helps keep the stretcher stable. But the preferred method is to have the patient come up with the paramedic.
Yep.
But there's ways we can skin it. It's not often that we reject a job due to a weight limitation on the winch, put it that way.
Yeah, so I think, most paramedics, except for myself, are generally under 100 kilos type of stuff. A lot of the people that we actually go and pick up generally tend to be people riding motorbikes who often carry a little bit of extra weight as well. So, but certainly in my time, I've never experienced a patient that we couldn't transport due to weight. Mate, that has been fantastic. One final question.
Yep.
Why do we have a tractor?
Yeah, so it's a Kubota tractor, but it's retrofitted to tow the aircraft in and out of the hangar. So we keep the aircraft in the hangar just to keep it out of the rain, the winds, anything that could damage it.
Yep.
And then once we get activated for a job, we'll tow it out onto the line, and then we'll start up and then we'll go. So the tractors are used to tow the aircraft out.
Mate.
You'll probably find them on farms too.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, Aaron, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thanks,
and
guys.
welcome to Prehospital Emergency. Thanks for your time.
See you later.
Bye.